Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next, the speedrunning experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally, the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know this game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. Today we're looking at Bart's Nightmare, which is a Simpsons-based game on the Genesis and Super Nintendo. Before we get stuck into it, if you do end up enjoying this video, consider subscribing to keep up to date. It helps the channel out a whole bunch, and I have a new video up every fortnight. As usual with this series, I'm going to take you back to the late 90s, early 2000s. While The Simpsons is a, moderately sized show now, it was absolutely everywhere back then. All the kids were talking about it at school, and you'd catch up every episode each night. In Australia, The Simpsons was on Channel 10 for the majority of my time growing up. It was really awesome because they'd show an old episode at 6 PM every weeknight, and then once a week there'd be an episode on at 7:30, which was whatever the new episode was. I actually remember going on school camps and I would ask my parents to record The Simpsons new episode on VCR so that I wouldn't miss it. I also got them to check my roaming Pokemon and lottery scores on Pokemon Diamond and Pearl too. I also remember a week where Channel 10 played the episode Radio Bart like 3 nights in a row. Normally they just play the episode sequentially, but I guess they really liked this episode. I actually remember as a kid taking some really awesome family holidays to places like the Blue Lake. But to be honest, we were just in the hotel room watching Austar because they will put on all-day Simpsons marathons. If you're wondering what Austar is, it's pretty much Australian cable TV. But eventually I got all the Simpsons DVDs. This happened gradually through Christmases and birthdays and stuff like that. This was a really cool experience because they actually never played Season 1 on Channel 10 for some reason. Maybe the animation was too old. So I had a really enjoyable school holidays watching through all of Season 1 and just finding 13 brand new episodes that were still that high quality of the early Simpsons. As I'm sure it's fairly common knowledge now, the earlier Simpsons was a bit better than the later Simpsons. The quality declined a bit, but I don't want to get too stuck into that. But it's fair to say I fell in love with The Simpsons from a pretty young age. Obviously there are jokes in there that appeal to kids, but there are jokes that appeal to adults as well. There's lots of little in-jokes all over the place. One other thing I love about this series is it's actually mostly mathematicians who worked on The Simpsons, so anytime they squeeze some cheeky maths into the background, there's all references and everything with it. Given I studied maths at uni, this appeals to me heaps, and I'd really recommend reading this book if you want to know more. There is so much math buried in The Simpsons. In fact, I even love The Simpsons so much that I got their painting and hung it up in my lounge room behind my couch. At any rate, given the popularity of the show, there's of course going to be some Simpsons games. These are the ones that I grew up with, the Space Mutants, the Simpsons Hit and Run on the PS2, which is great, and Bart's Nightmare on the Sega Mega Drive, and it's Bart's Nightmare we're going to talk about today. So Bart's Nightmare I have had for longer than I can remember. I think I've just always had it on the Mega Drive. It was also released on the Super Nintendo and the games play pretty much the same. The premise of the game is pretty weird. So Bart falls asleep at his desk and has all of his homework blow out his window from his desk fan. Then he has to go on dream adventures and get the 8 pages of homework back. I always found this a bit weird because, well, Bart's supposed to be a failing student at school and not really care about school. So I always found it kind of jarring that he cared this much about getting his homework back. But hey, I guess it was the 90s, it was a different time. Now this game was released in 1992, so if you're looking for any modern Simpsons references, you're not going to find them. To my estimation, this puts it somewhere in Season 3 that this was released. It's really cool though, because there's a lot of Season 1 and 2 stuff that gets snuck into the game. For example, there's this one part of the game where Smile and Joe Fishin from a Season 1 episode pops up. It's literally episode 3 of the entire series. I never actually knew who Smile and Joe Fishin was, so I always thought it was exclusive to the game, until I got those Season 1 DVDs and saw Season 1 for the first time. My mind was blown watching through those DVDs. I also find it kind of weird that you come across King Kong Homer in this game. The reason I find it weird is because that wasn't until Season 4 that they had the episode with King Kong Homer, so maybe that episode was inspired by the game? I guess we'll never know. Also, speaking of Simpsons Season 4, I find it weird how often they use the floating head or hearing a voice advice reminder trope in that season. Not just once, not just twice, about 3 entire times in Season 4, and then it happens again all over the show. The Simpsons really loves this one. And yeah, just in case you can't tell, I may have been rewatching The Simpsons lately. Anyway, onto the game itself. So the majority of the game takes place on this street scene, and basically what you got to do is find one of the pages that Bart dropped. He's supposed to be dreaming, so there's all sorts of wacky shenanigans going on. It's quite easy to find the pages when you first start out the game. You just walk left or right for a bit and they're there. But throughout the game, as it gets later and later, you have to do specific things to find pages. And I'll be honest, this is not telegraphed at all when you play the game. I never really read much of the manual, so it could be in there, but as a kid I had no idea how to find pages. I would get through 2 or 3 levels just finding those pages easily and then never be able to get any further. This game is actually pretty hard. In this little street area you can pick up these Z symbols, so if you hit them with bubblegum they'll go up that bar at the top. But it works really weirdly. You have to make sure that the Z's actually hit the bar, otherwise they'll go past it and you won't get the health. As a kid I never understood how to get more health, so I'd eventually take so many hits on the street level that I would just end up dying. Now when you do eventually find a page on the street, you jump onto it and you get to choose between 2 doors, so depending which colour you pick you'll get a different level. This blue one here is the Bartman flying level. Now Bartman only actually showed up in the show literally for about 5 seconds in the comic book episode, except there was a whole music video called Do the Bartman. Also, to my understanding, Bartman was a bit more frequent in the comics as well. I remember this Bartman music video and also all the old Butterfinger commercials being on the Season 2 DVD extras. Such a vibe. Anyway, coming back to the game, we've got the Bartman level here, which is pretty much a side-scrolling shooter. One thing that I really appreciate is the physics on the projectiles here. You can pretty much fire them up and have them all fall down. It creates some really cool strategies against bosses where you can like fire into the air in advance to where you know the boss is going to be and then wait for the bullets to all fall down and hit it. So it's a bit more intricate than just a normal flying shooty game. The Bartman stage has a lot of like electric clouds and projectiles that you have to avoid and things like that, so I found it pretty difficult as a kid, but I probably found it difficult just due to the length of it rather than the actual difficulty of some sections. I do find the cameos cool, like Smithers' device here that shoots things at you. Also, for some reason I just really like this Barney boss in this level where he's riding the pink elephant here. And once again, this pink elephant shows up in the show again, but not till season 10, which was like 7 years after this game. I find it so weird that the show seems to take inspiration from the game in some spots. But as long as you play through this level and you try not to take too much damage from anything, you'll normally be fine. I also really love that the health bar is basically just Super Mario 64. Next up I want to talk about these Indiana Jones style levels. These can be pretty brutal to deal with, and to be honest I don't think I've ever actually gotten past these levels. So yeah, Maggie spits the dummy at you, which is going to cause you issues. You have this guy chasing you, which is going to cause you more issues. But more importantly, if you step on the wrong column, you actually fall down and then you just like die and have to find the page again. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to run back and forth and then like push some columns up by pushing other columns down. And then once you push the correct column up, you'll be able to move forward, but actually knowing what to step on's hard. It's really ridiculous actually getting through this level without knowing where to go in advance. The speedrunners use this route to get through the level, and I really wish I'd had this as a kid when I played this game, because that means I probably would have actually been able to get through. And if it's not brutal enough that there's one of these Indiana Jones levels, there's actually 2. The good thing is though, once you finish the first one, it just rolls you straight into the second, so you don't have to go back to the streets and find another page. I would imagine this is the thing that stopped most people from actually beating this game if they had it. Next one I want to talk about is the green door, and this is sort of like a Godzilla Bart level. It's pretty fun actually, it was one of my favorites growing up. You got different buttons to hit different like planes and stuff, and so you've got various attacks that hit things at different heights, and you have to like know what heights to shoot things at in advance. It's pretty easy to take damage in this level, but if you know what you're doing then you can actually get through the whole thing. This was one of the ones that I was able to do occasionally as a kid, although it was still kind of tricky. Now, this one is another one of those 2-parter levels, so when you get to the end of this, Bart gets shrunk down by this thing here, and then you start climbing the tower as little Bart. People are like dropping things out the window at you, and you have Marge Mothra, which is kind of cool. This is also the level that has the King Kong Homer up the top, even though King Kong Homer wasn't in the show yet. Alright, next up we got the purple door. Now, a lot of people say this is like a bloodstream level, like you're in Bart's bloodstream, and I'm sure there's like something in the manual that says that or something, but I always interpreted it as you were slowing through like nuclear waste, mainly because these sort of look like nuclear baddie mutant things, but more importantly because Smile and Joe Fishin is in this level. Anyway, if you collect enough Smile and Joe fissions, the page will unlock up the top, and then you can actually beat the level. Although, as a kid, I never knew that the point was to actually collect Smile and Joe fissions, so I would just keep defeating these enemies and actually avoiding Smiling Joe, because I thought he was an enemy. So, once again, as a kid, I wasn't really able to beat this one, because I didn't know what to do. Now, normally you get the choice between two colored doors, but once you get to your last level, it shows the same color, which is always really satisfying when that happens. The yellow one is the last one we need to talk about, and it's the Itchy and Scratchy level. Now, this level is one of the main reasons I say that playing on the Genesis or Mega Drive is often better. And the reason is because, well, you can hammer these enemies from above. The hammer physics on the Genesis make this level really easy to cheese and get through, whereas on the SNES it's really actually quite difficult to get through the level. But that being said, if you're playing on the Genesis, you want to keep the hammer basically forever, just sit at the top of the room and you'll hit downwards towards Itchy and Scratchy. You might be tempted to get that fire extinguisher thing, and I think on the SNES that's not a bad weapon to get, but you just definitely want to keep the hammer on the Genesis version, keep playing it. I think because I could cheese this level with the hammer, this is pretty much the only one I was able to beat as a kid. So whenever we play it, we'd just go into the yellow doors whenever they were available, beat all the Itchy and Scratchy level to get a few pages, and then usually lose against the other levels, so I was never able to beat this game normally. Now you eventually get towards the end of the Itchy and Scratchy level and get like this furnace enemy thing, and then once you've beaten that, you've gotten through the whole level. Now normally I wouldn't spoil the end of the game, but there's not really too much different about the end of the game compared to if you just get a game over. So if you do get all 8 pages, well, the credits just play out as if you got a game over. The only difference is the page count is filled out and you get a slightly better grade on the fridge. Yeah, that's a weird thing. Ending this game, you can get a different grade depending on how well you did. It's 150,000 points for an A+, and you can do it by farming light globes in the Itchy and Scratchy level. But if you get an A+, the only thing that actually happens is that it says A+ on the fridge. I also love Lisa's disbelieved look that Bart would actually pass his homework on this, and it's always one of my favourite parts of finishing the game. Now the other thing that I find weird is what teacher would write all the way across a kid's work just to put the grade on there? Like, you would put the grade in the top corner, not just scribble all across their hard work. But at any rate, that's pretty much all there is to this game. I would recommend giving it a go, maybe just playing around in all the different minigames and getting a feel for them. But I wouldn't recommend that you need to necessarily beat this game to get the most out of it. The good thing about playing this as a kid is I pretty much was able to try every single level just by going into different doors when I chose different things, and I still have a great deal of nostalgia for this game, even if it hasn't held up particularly well these days. And while I have a great deal of nostalgia for this game, probably something like a Simpsons hit and run is more worth your time if you're playing a Simpsons game. Alrighty, so now we'll go on to looking at the speedrun. The speedrun just has the 2 categories, both for SNES and Mega Drive / Genesis here. So here there's a lot less runs on the Genesis version, so I won't really talk about that too much. We'll focus mainly on the SNES version. So the run we're going to be looking at is Tetsuo's world record in 1603. You'll notice that as soon as they drop in, they scroll the camera to the right, and that can be done with the R button on the SNES controller there. So we jump in here. Now, one big difference between the SNES and Genesis is that it has this animation going into the door here. That absolutely blew my mind when I got the internet, because the Genesis version just goes straight into the level. Now you can see here that they're going into this level and taking the path that I showed earlier on that screenshot, and this just allows you to push the right blocks down and up to get through the level. You might also notice that they'll stop here and they'll actually scroll the screen to the right. So the purpose of doing that is that Maggie will spit the dummy when you scroll the screen to the right there, and then it doesn't actually hit you and cause you to die. If you have a long straightaway, sometimes you can actually get out ahead of the dummy and avoid getting hit by it, but in this case it's usually best to scroll the screen so the dummy fires and doesn't hit you. So one example of running past Maggie's dummy just happens at the start of the second round of this level here. Bart just literally zooms forward and gets straight past the dummy there. So I imagine this level's probably not too bad once you're used to it in a speedrun, but it can be pretty frustrating to play through casually. So once this level's done, they go left on the street, and to my understanding this spawns a different random page, or at least it's possible to, and there's a bit of RNG into how long it takes you to get the pages here. But they go left for a little while, having the screen scroll to the left, and the page does appear pretty quickly. Next up we got the Itchy and Scratchy section. So you can see here it's a similar strategy to what I was using in the Genesis version when we talked about it earlier, although in the SNES version you do pretty quickly grab the other weapon. So yeah, this fire extinguisher is really just too good. One thing that I'll note about these enemies in this version is that they're all not random at all. So basically you can remember what side the enemies are all going to come in from, and you can plan accordingly. So that makes this level pretty predictable and pretty straightforward to get through. We then head into the kitchen here, and it seems that it's actually possible to weight down the bottom just on this tile here rather than going all the way into the kitchen. Into the kitchen is pretty dangerous, but if you just wait here and keep hitting itchy and scratchy, it makes it a lot more feasible to get through. So once again, we have to head back into the street. Now, one other way to spawn a page is to actually find a TV. So we can see spitting a seed at the TV does make a page spawn. I will mention that the pages won't spawn if there's too much on screen, which makes this really confusing on how to spawn pages in this game. Because I probably tried hitting the TV as a kid and it didn't work, so I didn't bother trying it again. The other weird thing about the street is when you jump over a letterbox, you can get a question mark like that. If you hit the question mark, it'll point an arrow, which is what I think in the direction of a page. But I never really understood how that worked, because you'd follow the arrow for ages and you wouldn't actually see a page. Anyway, next level we have is the green door, which is the Bart Godzilla level. Now normally when you play this level, Bart will be walking forward, although you'll notice that they're holding left on the D-pad to stop Bart from walking at all. The reason for this is when you walk over a building, it causes a short delay, and those delays stack up. So they take a bit more time, and it's more just a time limit sort of enemy killing threshold that you need to get to the end of this level, rather than an actual distance limit that you need to reach. So it's optimal to just stay still and avoid those building explosion slowdowns. Now at the end of this level we get the building climbing section, and to my understanding there is a bit of RNG as to which windows will open and have objects thrown out of them. So this would be one of the more difficult moments in the run to my understanding, and you'd have to get pretty lucky to go up here. Actually in this run it seems to be quite lucky just going straight up the middle of the building without having pretty much anything thrown at you. So it was really good to see this, and that's probably what helped this run be the world record. With this Marge enemy, you can actually avoid her by going onto the side of the building here, although it appears to be just slower than letting Marge hit you and fall down the building like this. Now when you get to the top of the tower you come across King Kong Homer here, and basically you've just got to wait so that he doesn't punch you, so you can go to the side so you don't get hit, or wait till his arm goes back up so you don't get hit. I actually remember as a kid seeing Mothra Marge and King Kong Homer sort of on the cover and title screen, and I always wondered where they were from in the game, because I was never able to beat the Godzilla level that easily until I was a bit older, so it was really cool to finally see these when I got up to these levels. I also really like the little touch at the end of this level where Bart's holding the page and the hand holding the page is actually green. So cool. Now next up on the streets we have quite a technical section, so we're sort of running out of those random pages we can get. So you'll see Bart get hit by the Jebediah head, and that's actually to stop them spawning on the road, because if there's too many of them on the street the page won't spawn because you've hit the object limit. Then what we're going to be doing is hitting this saxophone as the frog, and if you do that usually a page will spawn when you've done it. There we go. If you ever become a frog and don't want to be a frog in this game, you can go to the old lady who will give you a kiss and stop you from being a frog. You will also note that soda can was picked up, and that's going to be used for a page later as well. Next up we have the Bloodstream level. There's not really a whole lot to this apart from trying to kill the enemies as quick as possible. The tops of the enemies can hurt you because they're like spiky, so you got to get to them from the side. And with the red ones will blow up all the other enemies on the screen, so if you're lucky enough you'll actually get the red one when there's a few other enemies chasing you and take them out quite a bit quicker. Now this next bit is where the soda can comes into play. So when the bullies catch you there, you can use your soda can to kill all the enemies on the screen, and when the bullies go away, that spawns a page. You have to do it while the bullies are actually holding you though, otherwise it wouldn't work. And that's just the kind of thing that I never would have figured out playing this game as a kid. You'll notice here that they're going into another itchy and scratchy level, and that's the awkward thing about the itchy and scratchy levels, it doesn't just spit you into the next one over and over, you do have to find the page again and go into it. So this little weapon here, like the dart gun thing, this can be used for a quick kill right at the end of the itchy and scratchy level, so the goal is to hold on to it and make sure that you don't die. If you die and lose the dart gun, you might as well reset, because the quick kill saves so much time. So the quick kill comes right at the end of the level here. We have this like furnace enemy thing that you've got to deal with, and normally you're supposed to get a fire extinguisher and hit all the fire out of it. But if you use your dart gun to just hit the door over and over, it's done that quickly compared to normally what happens, which is like a minute of just shooting the fire in the furnace with the fire extinguisher. Also, from what I can tell in the Genesis World Record, that doesn't do the quick kill, so that might be why SNES is a bit faster. Now, normally you get the last page by shooting bubblegum at the grandma, and if you do that, it'll spawn a page. But the thing that made this world record so good is they get a random page pretty much straight away coming into the last level. Literally just move to the right and there it is. So I imagine for that reason it's going to be pretty hard to go up against this run. So the last level done in this run is the Bartman level, and you can see it just going through pretty much normally. We're going to be coming across the first boss here, which is Sherry and Terry, and you can see just letting the bullets float in the air, doing a lot of damage here, trying to space them out as much as possible there. We get Barney coming up next, which is pretty much just the same strategy. You let the bullets fly and fall onto Barney, and then once Barney's on screen, you're just firing as quick as you can to deal with him. We've got Smithers next, and Smithers will actually fire these like missile things at you, but once he runs out of the missiles, he's basically done and he leaves. So there's no point to actually fighting Smithers by shooting at him, you just let him fire off all his missiles and he's done. Also, I know it's a little small feature, but I really love how they're all normal clouds here, and then you have the electric clouds. But they waited till the background was the nuclear power plant before the clouds went electric, and then they deal damage to you. These electric clouds can be pretty brutal though, because there are some absolutely tight squeezes getting through there without getting hurt. For some reason after the power plant, you fight Smithers a second time. I don't know why this is necessary, and it makes the level a little bit too long to be super enjoyable. Now the last boss here is actually Mr. Burns, and this boss, what you want to do is you want to shoot projectiles into the air so they fall onto his plane when he flies through. Mr. Burn will also deal a lot of damage to you if he does hit you, so you got to be careful of that. But that's pretty much how the strategy plays out, and once you understand sort of the physics of the projectiles, it's pretty straightforward to deal with him. Now, given this was the last page that was needed in the run, this is actually where the run finishes off. So a really impressive display, especially with that random page coming into this level. Good to see. Now usually I'd make a recommendation whether or not to run this game, but I've actually never tried runs myself. Playing it casually is pretty enjoyable, but I reckon it would be more enjoyable in a speedrun when you know how to deal with all the jank and you can get pages predictably and stuff. So it wouldn't hurt to have a shot if you're interested. Alright, next up we have the Taz section. So this game does have a Taz, submitted all the way back in 2007. It is a very old Taz. Usually this means the Taz is improvable, but it looks like nobody's had to go out improving this Taz yet. It might be a little bit too annoying to manipulate the RNG with the pages and stuff. Now this Taz was done in 14 minutes and 9 seconds, which puts it roughly 2 minutes faster than the RTA world record, although you never really should directly compare them. One reason why the Taz is probably pretty fast is just the random pages. You can see right there, you find a random page, jump straight onto it. I also love the little psych out on the door in the Taz, it adds a little bit of flair to the whole thing. Now in the submission text for the Taz, they talk a lot about hitting all the enemies out of the sky, so there's like these crusty balloons and stuff that they're hitting pretty much straight away. They say that if you let them linger on screen too long, it can cause quite a bit of lag, so to my understanding, this is where the Taz would save a bit of time over RTA on this level. You've then also got the little manips like keeping Sherry and Terry on screen for ages here, just allowing the entire boss to be killed in pretty much one cycle without it ever leaving screen there. You then got the Smithers fight. You don't really need to worry about getting killed in one hit because you can always like shoot these missiles out of the air. That section is a lot faster than what RTA is able to do. I also kind of like that they intentionally take damage on these poison electric cloud things. Bart actually goes to like a skeleton on the damage bar up the top left there, which I always thought was kind of a cool touch. And the level just plays out as normal for the rest. But you can see here with actually getting shots to hit this plane, you can get so many to hit the plane in a Taz setting because you know exactly what timing you need to have them hit it all. The Taz then enters the street and just heads left for a random page. I don't think it was fully understood how these random pages can be manipulated. I'm not actually sure if it is still understood how they can be manipulated, but the Taz doesn't take too long to get the page anyway here. The Taz will go into the pink room, which is Bart's bloodstream level, and basically it's able to know what side these things are going to spawn on, and to my understanding these things are random where they spawn. So one thing they talk about in the Taz submission text a lot is getting these red things on screen at optimal times for when there are other enemies spawned on screen. So that means that you can just basically kill the red things and use them to kill a whole bunch of the other enemies there. So this was actually V2 of a Taz. They had one Taz before this, and this level was one of the levels, so they saved quite a lot of time because of that. Now this is a little bit weird. They take the skateboard here, which allows you to move pretty fast to the left, It actually takes them quite a while to get one of these random pages in the TAS. I guess it's more optimal to get a random page than it is to do all the things like spinning bubblegum on the grandma or hitting the TVs or whatever. But I reckon this is probably somewhere where the TAS might be able to save a bit of time, because some of the RTA random pages I was seeing, especially at the end of that world record run, were much faster than this one. Although I'm not entirely sure how manipulable those pages are, so it might just be that you can't really have much control over them. We get the itchy and scratchy level here, but there's not really too much to it over RTA. There's some cool movement tech with Bart actually, but realistically you're just killing the enemies as quick as you can. I guess it's good that you can sort of run to the edge of the screen and kill them as soon as possible rather than just waiting in the middle and moving back and forth. And RTA would generally use a safe spot in the kitchen to kill all the enemies from, just on the tile down there, but I guess in TAS you don't need to worry about it. Also, this weapon that Bart has here, I'm fairly sure it's not in the Genesis version because it doesn't look that familiar to me at all. It seems to be like a can of soft drink that he's spraying at the enemies. Pretty weird design. Anyway, we head back to the streets now, and we're going to head to the right for one of these random pages. So it seems like the strategy the TAS is using here is not really doing those gimmicks to get pages, it's more just going to the left or right until they get the random pages. And I suppose that makes sense, because if the TAS can manipulate the random pages, that's going to be quicker than doing all the gimmicks. And I can tell you, compared to me playing this game as a kid, this TAS is getting pages a lot faster, even if I think it might be able to go a little bit faster with better RNG manipulation maybe. The TAS then takes on the Indiana Jones level, and you can see that it's not just a straight shot to the end, you do have to move the blocks up and down as required here. And it's always this second bit of the Indiana Jones level that's really satisfying in TAS, because you just sort of zoom all the way to the end here, and then you don't have to move up and down that much throughout the section. Now the TAS actually doesn't rely on a random page for this next one, it hits a TV just off screen with the little watermelon seed, and then goes straight into here really fast. And we see the TAS holding on to this little plunger weapon and doing the quick cool on the furnace as well. So good to see that in both TAS and RTA, even all the way back in 2007 when the TAS was made. Now, I actually can't tell how the TAS is getting this page. They shoot bubblegum off screen, which probably is hitting an old lady in the head and spawning a page, but it's not entirely clear there. But with these last few pages, they are just so much faster than RTA in the TAS, and that's probably where it's saving a lot of those 2 minutes from. The TAS does move forward in this Bartzilla level, so it appears that may have actually lost it some time over RTA. But I suppose it's also doing a lot of lag reduction with the enemies that it's killing versus not killing, and the exact timing of that and everything. The TAS then has this big climbing section here. So because the TAS can manipulate RNG, basically they're just going to go straight up with Bart here and not really have to worry about any enemies like the window dropping or anything like that. They have moved to the right here, which I'm presuming is just like a timing thing or an RNG manipulation thing, but it's better to move left or right if you need to, rather than getting hit by stuff. You can see there the hitbox on Marge is kind of weird, but they're able to get past Marge without falling down, which I'm assuming is what the RTA run was trying to do before. They make it pretty much all the way up to the top here, and then get the page from Homer. That's the last page, so that's pretty much where the TAS ends timing. I imagine it would actually help a little bit. Since this has a long cutscene at the end of this section, the TAS might have wanted to do this one last, just so that they could end inputs out a little bit earlier. But anyway, that's the TAS there, and even though it plays perfectly, the game still doesn't want to give you A+. I guess the only way to do that is to farm a whole bunch of points in Itchy and Scratchy, which in all honesty is pretty boring for not much of a different ending. Although apparently Lisa freaks out if you get A+, even more than what she's doing now. So I am kind of curious to see how this TAS could come down with modern TASing tools, and I don't really know enough about RNG in this game to understand how much time could potentially be saved. But it'd be cool to see somebody have a go at it in the modern day and see how much further this game can come down. Who knows, maybe sub 14 could be possible or something like that. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.